Welcome to Sandy Parish Church, sermons by the Reverend Hugh Davis. Today, it's time to get into gear.
Hi, good to see you again. Even if it is virtual, it's good to be together to think things through together. This is now the fifth week of what they've called lockdown as we try to manage with the pandemic of the coronavirus. For many of us, it's really difficult, emotionally, physically, and relationally. And so many different thoughts and challenging times for us. Over this last week, I've been thinking about how this virus has affected the way in which we relate to one another, and our community, and indeed the whole world is going to be different because of it. But it's been going on for long enough now, and it seems to me that it's now time to get into gear. That's the title for today, Getting into Gear. When you're in a car and sometimes you're on a long, steep downhill, you can coast. You can, if you're not supposed to, but you can. You can take the car out of gear and you can just coast and gently enjoy the ride of going downhill in the silence and the quietness. But you can't go back up the hill that way. To get back up the hill, to go somewhere, you have to get into gear. And it strikes me that it's time for us to get into gear. No longer to just go with the flow, but to get into gear and to decide what we want to do and where we want to go. I think that the virus and the pandemic, the government's response to that has been such because they didn't want to go with the flow. To simply let the pandemic and the virus run its course would be to do what has happened in history before. Over the years, there have been many pandemics and plagues, and some of them have been absolutely devastating. Right in the earliest days of the Christian Church in AD 165, there was the Antonine Plague in Rome and Italy and the Middle East. And during that time, more than 5 million people perhaps died. It may have been smallpox. But the church made its name during that time. It was very early in the church's history. It had been persecuted by the Roman Empire, but when people fled Rome in order to find safety in the countryside, it was the Christians that stayed behind and nursed the sick. In 541, the Justinian plague killed a quarter of the population in the Middle East. 25 million people might have died during that plague. The great plague of the bubonic plague you know about, Europe, Africa, Asia, where perhaps 75 million, maybe 200 million people died right across Europe and Africa. 1918 flu, perhaps killed 25 million people in 25 weeks. Imagine that. 25 million in 25 weeks. And so that is partly why the government has been trying to contain this pandemic, because right at the beginning we didn't know if this virus was going to be very virulent and kill a lot of people, or whether, as turns out, most people would get it and it wouldn't be as devastating as some of the others, like the bubonic plague. But at the early days we didn't know, and we still don't know, to be honest, without the lockdown, what would happen. And so the government has got into gear to make a difference and to choose the direction that we go in, rather than just go with the flow. If we had just gone with the flow, then maybe instead of 30,000 people dying in the UK, it may have been 4 times that. Imagine if within a month you had not just 25,000 people die, but 100,000 people die. And they would be dying in our homes, in our bedrooms. We would be nursing them. They would be infecting the rest of the family, and the family would be infecting the rest of the people that we come into contact with, if we hadn't done something. And so the government has tried to do what it feels is the best thing to contain it by trying to encourage people to social distancing and lockdown. That, I think, I could describe as, instead of going with the flow, instead of just going downhill, allowing the pandemic to run its course, the government has tried to get into gear and to change the way in which this goes. And it made me think of 4 things. I love alliterations, and so for me, the alliteration of gear, G.E.A.R, is helpful to me in my thinking. I need to get into gear now. It's been long enough of just going with the flow. I need to take control, and I need to decide new vision, new priorities, new purpose. I need to grasp God's power to change and to make a difference to my life and to make a difference to other people's lives. And so it's time, church, to get into gear. The G standing for generosity and gratitude, to give thanks for what we have and to be generous with what we have. That's the first thing we must do, is say, thank you, God, for the situation that I'm in, the privileges that I have. Here in the UK, it may be difficult. Food may be a little tight. Employment may be very difficult for you. Talking just this morning with somebody who's just been laid off after 21 years in the company. They've been told that there won't be a job when this pandemic finishes. They're devastated. You may be in the same situation with your relationships, worried about your children's education. But there is a lot to be grateful for. You can take control of certain things, if not everything. And I think of my friends in Africa, in Burundi, or speaking with somebody whose friends are in the Gambia, where the whole economy is built upon tourism. And now that tourists are not coming into the country, very few people have got any money. Food is very difficult to find. They can't self-isolate. There are going to be hundreds of thousands of deaths in the poorer parts of our world. We have a lot to be grateful for. And we need to be generous with what we have, because that is good for our heart. It is good for our soul. It does us good to sacrifice and to give. It's a good thing to be generous, as God is generous to us. So the G stands for generosity, and it stands for gratitude. But the E for me stands for encouragement. There is always the role for encouragement. And you may not have much, but you can give encouragement to people. Encouragement is given through words, through tiny gifts, through just taking a plant from the garden and presenting it to someone else, writing a card, making a telephone call. There is a way of encouraging people, speaking well to our children, encouraging them, telling them how beautiful they are, how wonderful they are, how good that is. Being an encourager is so much needed as a profession today. Become a professional encourager. Become skilled at it. Why not set it as your new hobby? Why not set it as the plan and the purpose for your life, that people will call you the encourager? There was one man in the Bible like that in the book of Acts. His name was Barnabas. And he was called Barnabas. That wasn't his real name. He was called Barnabas because it means the son of encouragement. And they nicknamed him Barney, the son of encouragement. Because when he first became a Christian, one of the earliest things he did was to take a field that he had and to sell it and to give the money to the poor. It would be like taking your second car and giving the money that you raise to the NHS. It would be like taking your holiday fund that you've saved up for this year but you can't use and giving it away to other people. For myself anyway, I want to become generous, and I want to be filled with gratitude, and I want to be an encourager. But the A in GEAR stands for me for action. All of this is of no use unless it comes into action. What does my generosity mean? What does my gratitude bring forth? What does my encouragement to other people? How do I do that? And so to act, even in small ways, taking tiny steps, but those steps will take you further along the road. And you have no idea how far those small steps will take you. Captain Tom had no idea at all. Who could have thought? How could it be that some small steps with a Zimmer frame around his garden would raise £30 million for the NHS? Small steps, take action. You can take action. Talk to friends, make a phone call, say to somebody, I am so depressed. I am so hemmed in. I am so lacking in any vision for my life. I don't know what to do. What should I do? Talk to a friend and have them speak into your heart and speak into your life. Or let the Bible and God's Spirit speak into your life. Give it time. Open it up. Read and pray and say, God, tell me one thing that I can do today that will encourage somebody, that will show a generosity, that will show that I'm grateful. And the last is reflection. To reflect upon this time, to regain vision, to regain momentum, to begin again, to think of how to develop my life and take it forward rather than just let it go downhill from here on. So instead of coasting downhill, I want to put the car into gear again. And as I get into gear, I find that I have control of the car and I can go back up the hill. I can decide where I'm going to go. Whereas if I just go downhill and go with the flow, then I end up wherever the car takes me. So I hope that this is helpful to you, that as you get into gear in this second phase of the pandemic, that God would inspire you, give you vision, strength and power, purpose, and his presence in your home and in your life, and make you a Barnabas to the people you live with. May God bless you. Thank you for being with me this morning.